Almost 100 years ago, one of history's greatest economists made a bold prediction. By 2030, we'd only work 15 hours a week. He was spectacularly wrong. But here's the fascinating part. He was also spectacularly right. John Maynard Keynes based his prediction on something real. Technology would dramatically boost productivity. And on that front, he nailed it. Automation, computers, satellites, massive energy grids, innovations he couldn't have even dreamed of. By the year 2000, US productivity had increased several times over. Never in human history had it been easier to produce so much with so little human effort. And yet, here we are. Men working almost as many hours as they did back then. More women in the workforce too. So what went wrong? Or more disturbingly, what went right and we just chose to ignore it? Are we secretly addicted to work? Do we rely on it for pride, purpose, identity? Or do we simply prefer consuming more over working less? Here's the part of the puzzle Keynes missed: the economy's uncanny ability to invent new jobs, particularly in the service sector. And while that makes us dynamic, a disturbing number of those jobs have genuinely questionable value. A third of British workers believe their job is completely meaningless. Meanwhile, products like mouse jigglers, tiny gadgets that fake computer activity, are flying off shelves so people can pretend to be productive. Which raises three uncomfortable questions. Have we already achieved the 15-hour work week and simply failed to notice? Has that failure quietly fueled a rise in meaningless work for the sake of work? And could something as simple as a 4-day work week actually fix this? He predicted the standard of living in progressive countries would be 4 to 8 times higher within 100 years. In 2011, real GDP per person in the UK was over 5 times what it was in 1931. Most advanced economies grew by even more. And yes, average working hours have fallen since 1929. Technology did deliver productivity gains that gave us two things: higher living standards and less work required to achieve them. But the reduction in hours? Nowhere near as dramatic as he predicted. And when you look closer, a troubling pattern emerges. Most of the decline in working hours happened decades ago, mid-20th century. From 1980 to now, annual work hours have barely moved in countries like the US and UK. Barely moved. And that's just average hours per worker. It doesn't count the explosion in overall workforce participation. In 1948, only 32% of working-age women in the US were employed. Today, it's around 58%. So while the average worker might clock slightly fewer hours, a much higher percentage of the population is working. So why, if we can theoretically afford to work less, don't we? So why, if we can theoretically afford to work less, don't we? One theory points to two forces pulling in opposite directions. When your wage increases, reaching your target income becomes easier. So you might choose to work less and enjoy more leisure. That's the income effect. But the flip side, when wages rise, leisure gets more expensive. Every hour you're not working now costs you more potential income. That's the substitution effect. And what seems to have happened over the last century is that the substitution effect has been winning, and by a lot. Here's why that makes sense. New technologies didn't just improve productivity, they created entirely new things to want. Restaurants, cars, foreign holidays, smartphones, central heating, washing machines. None of these were normal in the 1930s. Our real wages rose, but so did our minimum expectations for what a decent life looks like. And for most people on medium wages, that decent life still requires full-time work. In that sense, we can't afford to work less, at least not individually. There are other forces at play too. Keynes acknowledged that humans, like all animals, are evolutionarily hardwired to work. If you didn't hunt, forage, or build shelter, you died. That instinct is deeply embedded in our DNA. Long hours are seen as virtuous. Part-time work is often stigmatized. And in a status-driven competitive society, what you earn often defines who you are. The result? As an economy, we chose to work more and consume more, rather than work less and consume less. Keynes underestimated human desire. But because productivity is now so extraordinarily high, there simply isn't enough tangible, honest work to fill every 9 to 5. What we're left with are economies where non-essential sectors dominate GDP, and within those sectors, a lot of the work being done is of genuinely questionable value. Writing reports no one will read, delivering presentations that change no decisions, entire roles existing purely because of unnecessary bureaucracy. Sounds like these jobs are a bit pointless, doesn't it? That's exactly what anthropologist David Graeber argued. In his book Bullshit Jobs, he defined them as roles so completely pointless that even the person performing them can't convince themselves there's a valid reason they exist. And yet, they're often well paid. These jobs cluster in consulting, corporate bureaucracy, finance, marketing, admin-heavy roles, and layers of middle management, where automation has already done most of the actual work. The cultural resonance of films like Office Space, The Incredibles, and shows like The Office and Severance tells you this feeling of futility in modern office life is widely, deeply relatable. A UK study found that 53% of workers in financial services, 53% in retail, and 46% in media, marketing, and advertising felt their job wasn't making a meaningful contribution to the world. In the Netherlands, 40% of workers don't find their job meaningful. Now, to be fair, just because a worker feels their job is pointless doesn't mean it actually is. Graeber's theory is vigorously contested. One EU-based study rejects it entirely. The basic counter-argument: value is subjective. If you're being paid, there's demand. Therefore, there's value, even if it doesn't feel that way. Critics also point to negative workplace cultures where meaningful work simply goes unrecognized, where employees lose agency and become disengaged. That argument aligns more with Marx's theory of alienation than Graeber's. Large portions of office workers consider their job meaningless, and that is strongly, consistently linked to lower well-being. Part of the problem is simple. For many people, there just isn't enough meaningful work to fill a 5-day 9-to-5 pattern. So tasks stretch. Time gets wasted. A U.S. survey this year found 58% of workers regularly pretend to work. They're calling it ghost working. An international survey found 65% of employees engage in what researchers call productivity theater. But how does this survive in the private sector? Where market competition and profit motives are supposed to eliminate inefficiency, because the inefficiency is hidden. In theory, what you earn should reflect what you actually produce for your company, your marginal product of labor. But in practice, for remote and collaborative roles, it's nearly impossible to calculate. A mechanic who fixes 3 cars a day at $100 each, easy. A remote worker who answered 6 emails, updated spreadsheets, and attended 5 meetings? The revenue generated is so indirect that no one can accurately measure it. So companies use timesheets, and timesheets create perverse incentives. Employees inflate how long tasks take. Utilization rates look healthy. Everyone looks productive. Parkinson's law captures it perfectly. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion. The end result, in most office environments, presence equals performance. Looking busy is rewarded more than actual output. And that is a lose-lose situation of staggering scale. Employers being deceived, employees spending huge portions of their working lives essentially doing nothing meaningful. So, could a 4-day work week be the fix? Between 2022 and 2024, 4-day workweek pilots ran across the world. Most followed the 80 to 100 rule: 80% of the hours, 100% of the salary, 100% of the output. The largest trial in the UK involved 61 companies and nearly 2,900 workers. And the results? It worked. Revenue held steady, even increased in some cases. Productivity rose significantly. Staff turnover dropped. Sick days plummeted. Employee well-being improved. Team morale went up. 92% of participating companies chose to keep the 4-day week after the trial ended. Similar results emerged in other countries. The pilots proved Parkinson's law is real. Shrink the available time and the bloated, unnecessary, unfocused activity simply disappears. You can't afford to engage in productivity theater if there are only 4 days to deliver the same results. The consequence of failure is going back to 5. But, and this is important, a 4-day week doesn't suit every sector. Manufacturing, healthcare, education, retail, hospitality, anywhere output is directly tied to time or requires 5+ days of service. And a one-size-fits-all Fridays off approach won't work everywhere, even where it could. There are also real economic risks. 4-day week sectors would attract more workers, which could push wages down in those roles. It would create a 2-tier system, white-collar workers enjoying better hours while blue-collar and key workers don't. Resentment would be natural and arguably justified. Those remaining on 5-day schedules would rightfully demand higher compensation for their longer hours. If 4-day sectors drained labor from essential 5-day sectors, wage pressure would follow, adding a political dimension to what started as a workplace experiment. Then there's capacity. In many roles, employees already have too much work to compress into 4 days. Businesses unable to maintain output would either hire additional staff or pay overtime, both of which push up costs, get passed on as higher prices, and contribute to inflation. And here's the critical limitation of those positive pilot results that often gets overlooked: self-selection bias. The companies that volunteered were precisely the companies most likely to succeed. Those results can't be generalized to the whole economy. That's not a small caveat, it's a significant one. Even so, the evidence is compelling enough to warrant serious continued exploration. It would be short-sighted to dismiss the 4-day week entirely because it doesn't fit every workplace, and there's another force coming: artificial intelligence. As AI continues to accelerate the automation of work, productivity gains could create even more space for free time, exactly what Keynes originally envisioned. Given how little working hours have changed since the 1980s, dramatic overnight change seems unlikely. But the longer arc of history gives reason for cautious optimism. We moved from 14-hour, 6-day industrial work weeks to the modern 8-hour, 5-day standard, despite fierce resistance at the time. That shift happened. It became the norm. We're all better for it. But since the mid-20th century, there have been no comparable reforms despite enormous productivity gains. The most likely explanation for that stagnation? Inertia. Not conspiracy, not malice, just inertia. Time is a finite resource, arguably the most valuable one we have. More of it spent on what genuinely matters correlates directly with life satisfaction and fulfillment. The remarkable truth is that Keynes was right about the technology. We are the first civilization in human history to have solved economic scarcity in its most fundamental form. If we never try working less, we'll never know whether it can work. Now, speaking of countries that are already ahead of this curve, there's a fascinating case study you need to see. What happens when an entire nation gets cut off, when no one wants to trade with you and yet it still thrives? That's the subject of our next video. Click it now. The answer is stranger and more instructive than you'd expect.